Today, as we begin the 5th week of Lent, Passiontide, the Gospel, appropriately enough, recounts what happened when some Greek pilgrims approached the apostles and asked to see our Lord. Clearly, there were a great many ways in which our Lord might have responded to this request. So the choice he made to direct our attention towards his death and resurrection, that choice cannot but be significant. Indeed, the juxtaposition of directing attention towards our Lord's death and resurrection in the context of responding to Greek pilgrims of presumably Gentile origin, strongly suggests that our Lord was making a universal point about his forthcoming death and resurrection, one which therefore we need to pay attention to. Now, our Lord made his point through the use of a crucial example. Unless a grain of wheat falls on the ground and dies, he remarked, it remains only a single grain. But if it dies, it yields rich fruit. In order for the new life of the wheat to be generated, therefore, the old life of the wheat grain first had to be corrupted. The new life of the wheat followed as a consequence of the corruption of the old life of the wheat grain. New life follows old. Moreover, we can take things a step further and draw an analogy. The old life of the wheat grain is related to the new life of the wheat as Christ's earthly life is related to his newly resurrected life. Consequently, just as the wheat grain's old life ended before the wheat's new life could begin, so also Christ's earthly life ended before his new resurrected life could begin. Christ's earthly life is to his resurrected life what the old life of the wheat grain is to the new life of the wheat. They are, in effect, proportionately similar. Still, what's the significance of this dynamic of old life ending and new life beginning? Well, we have to be a little cautious here because we don't want to inadvertently limit the power of God in an inappropriate manner. Admittedly, in one sense, Christ couldn't rise to new life unless he had first died. After all, if one is going to rise from the dead, then one must first be dead. But this is merely what Aquinas would have called suppositional necessity. Supposing the end to have taken place, then we can infer the necessity of the means. However, from this it doesn't follow that it was absolutely necessary that Christ had first to die in order to experience the new life of the resurrection. In principle, it's possible that God could have hypostatically united human nature to the person of the Word in such a way that from the first moment of the union, Christ would have enjoyed resurrected life without ever having died. In other words, that resurrected life could have been granted to Christ as a gift from his Father from the very beginning of the incarnation. So this dynamic of old life ending and new life beginning doesn't arise as a consequence of a limitation of God's power. It's more because of a choice which God made. What choice was that then? Well, there's a hint of it in the Gospel when we're told, I will draw all people to myself. Granted, the emphasis here is on Christ's ascension, but the point applies to his resurrection as well. The dynamic of old life ending and new life beginning is a process into which we can enter and which, crucially, we can be affected by. Moreover, that we need to be affected by this process is well illustrated in the first reading where, after highlighting the failure of Israel to be faithful to the covenant, God tells us that deep within them I will plant my law, writing it on their hearts. In other words, it's not enough for us merely to be told what to do. There has to be a fundamental change in our hearts as well. Old life must give way to new, and that's even more true when it comes to the new life of the resurrection. But how do we enter into this process? Well, we were united to Christ through baptism, and once we've been joined to Christ through baptism, we can die with Christ and we can rise with him. Admittedly, things may go wrong from time to time, but if we turn back towards Christ with contrition, he always welcomes us back. Throughout the rest of our Christian life, we can continue to nourish this bond through faith and the sacraments. Indeed, if ultimately we remain united to Christ, then eventually we will come to enjoy the new life of the resurrection for ourselves. That's a worthy goal. As we enter this 5th week of Lent, let's continue our Lenten practices in anticipation of achieving that goal.